Hey guys, and welcome to another Mystery Monday video on my channel. Today's video is going to be another video in the Missing 411 series on this channel. So with that being said, let's get right into today's case. Thelma Polly Melton, better known to family as friends as Polly, was living out her retirement years with her husband Bob when she strangely just vanished. The couple had been married for 6 years, and Bob was actually 20 years older than Polly, making Polly 52 at the time of their marriage and Bob 72. Bob actually also had 2 adult sons of his own, and although Polly was married in the past, she didn't have any children. Bob and Polly decided to retire together, and in their old age, they actually decided to move into a trailer, and they did this so that they had the freedom to move around and travel wherever they wanted. In the winter, they would actually remain in Jacksonville, Florida, inside of their trailer, I guess just at a trailer park. But after the weather began to warm up, they would get into their trailer and travel down to North Carolina, where they rented out like a kind of private camping area with 10 other retired couples in North Carolina. This group who they stayed with in North Carolina was a very tight-knit community. In fact, I think that I read somewhere, in order for you to be able to camp with them on this private land, every single person in the group had to approve of you and say that they were comfortable with you being a part of their group. And the land that this group actually rented to stay on was just about half a mile outside of Smoky Mountain National Park in North Carolina. The couple really enjoyed this area a lot, and Polly was very familiar with this area as she had been hiking these trails for 20 some odd years. She had a lot of medical conditions at this time. She had high blood pressure and had a second medical condition that kind of made it difficult for her to walk, so she had to walk at a very slow pace. And she was on medicine for all of this at this time, but she really did enjoy going for walks and getting in her daily exercising, even if it meant that she had to walk through these trails a little bit slower than usual. On September 25th, 1981, Polly and 2 of her friends who were from the camping group that stayed with them in North Carolina decided to go for a hike through the trails of the Smoky Mountain National Park. And they did this quite often. Like I said before, Polly really loved to walk these trails, so her and her friends did this a lot. The 3 women were just walking and hiking and chatting and just having a normal walk through the trails, and nothing was really out of the ordinary. Until around 4 p.m. when Polly decided to really quicken her pace. One of the women that were hiking with Polly actually recalled saying to her, "What has gotten into you? Slow down." They couldn't keep up. She was just moving so quickly. And at this point, Polly just kind of turned around and smirked at them and continued walking at this very quick, fast speed. At this point, Polly was quite ahead of her 2 friends that she was hiking with, and they actually came to a part in the trail where there was kind of like a corner, but it isn't clear if it was like a corner that wrapped around a mountain or trees or a hill or what it was, but her 2 friends had actually lost sight of her. Because of Polly's medical condition that I mentioned before that actually required her to walk quite slow, her friends thought that she wouldn't be able to keep up this quickened pace and that she would be waiting for them somewhere along the trail. But when the women reached the end of the trail and there was no sign of Polly, they thought that she must have just gone back to her trailer. So they headed there to kind of make sure everything was okay and just say to her, you did a really good job on that hike, you were flying. But when they arrived there, Bob was there all by himself, and he said that he hadn't seen Polly. This kind of worried all of them, including Bob. So Bob, as well as Polly's 2 friends, ran around the park and asked everybody who they knew in the area if they had seen Polly. But to their horror, nobody had seen Polly since before the 3 had went on the hike. The group was extremely panicked, and the police were informed immediately, and a search for Polly was started that evening. Bob, Polly's husband, was actually so stressed out and devastated about his missing wife that he had to be hospitalized the same evening that he found out that his wife was missing. A huge search was launched in hopes of finding anything that could lead to Polly's safe return, but police say that they actually found no trace of her at all. And according to Bob, this was very strange because Polly's shoes had a very distinctive crack in them, which would set her footprints aside from any other hikers, but they couldn't even find her footprints after she had seemingly vanished around this corner. Because of the odd circumstances surrounding this case, there was only ever really one theory, and that is that Polly might have had a secret lover. It has been widely speculated online that Polly actually possibly picked up her pace while on the hike with her friends so that she could meet somebody along the trail. Something that I forgot to mention a little bit earlier on in this video is that Polly actually, due to her medical condition, did not have a license, meaning that she didn't have access to any cars and she couldn't have drove herself anywhere. So for her to have just vanished, she couldn't have drove away by herself. While staying in this kind of trailer community that Polly and Bob always went with in North Carolina, Polly actually volunteered to help with the old folks that also stayed in this area. So every single day she would go and I guess help serve them food and just volunteer with them. And she had been doing this for the last 4 years since her and Bob started staying at this park. But strangely, on the day that she vanished, she didn't even sign up to help, which was very strange because she would sign up to help for at least an hour every single day. So for her to just not sign up to help seems odd. And the last day that she did actually sign up to volunteer and help with these elderly people, and the last day that she did show up to do so, she was making a lot of strange phone calls to the town. And this was very weird because this was the first time in the 4 years that Polly had worked there that she'd ever used the phone. People have speculated that Polly possibly planned this very distinctively to make it look like she vanished in the woods in order to not break Bob's heart. But her friends and family say that Polly was very, very happy with where she was in her life right now, and her and Bob had a very happy marriage, and there was no reason that she would want to run away, and this would have been very out of character for her. Bob was so distraught over the loss of Polly that he had to be cared for by his 2 sons for quite a while. And after his 2 sons stopped caring for him, he decided that he was going to sell his trailer and actually moved into a retirement home where he had to be cared for by nurses. His wife disappearing just absolutely broke him. Despite there being really only one theory in this case, and a lot of people really standing behind that one theory, this is one of the more popular missing persons cases that revolves around people vanishing in national parks. And it does, like every other national park disappearance, have a lot of strange properties. This case, again, is also very similar to some of the other missing 411 cases that I have covered on my channel, as Polly seemed to disappear just feet away from her friends. People should have heard something or seen something, or something would have stood out to them, you'd think, if she had been abducted or had fallen or something had happened to her, but there was absolutely nothing. My heart sincerely goes out to Thelma Polly Melton's family, as well as her loved ones and anybody who has been affected by her case, because these national park disappearances are just so tragic. Glen Hyde was born on December 9th, 1898, and was actually a farmer in Twin Falls, Idaho. Bessie Louise Haley was born on December 29th, 1905, and was from Parkinsburg, West Virginia. The couple had actually met on a ship that was traveling to LA in 1927. And despite the fact that Bessie was actually married at the time, the two of them became absolutely infatuated with each other. And Bessie went home after this trip and filed for a divorce with her current husband. And the couple was actually married on April 10th, 1928, which was the exact same day that Bessie's divorce with her first husband was finalized. The couple had decided that for their honeymoon they would go river running, and they decided to do this down the Grand Canyon in Colorado and Green River. They had left for this adventure on October 20th, 1928. Now, because this was so long ago, at this time the Grand Canyon didn't have any guided tours, meaning that the only people that traveled down the Grand Canyon were very avid hikers and people who were really experienced with river running. Glen was quite experienced in river running, and he wanted to actually set a record for traveling down the Grand Canyon the fastest. Bessie was less experienced in this, and this actually could have possibly been her first time ever doing something like this. But despite this being her first time, she would have actually been the first woman to ever boat down the Grand Canyon. At one point during this hike, the couple actually ran low on supplies, so they had to hike into a town or somewhere where they could buy supplies and load up again on all of the things that they needed. At this point, they met a man by the name of Amir Cod, and forgive me if I'm pronouncing that wrong, I am so bad with pronunciation of absolutely everything. But at this point, they met this man who was actually a photographer, and he photographed the couple, and this is actually the last known photo of Bessie and Glen Hyde. The last sighting of this couple was actually by this photographer on November 18th, 1928, and he'd actually last seen them boating away under the Hermit's Rapids. The same photographer told reporters that during the time that he had encountered the couple, Glen had actually told him that they didn't have life jackets. And because this was very dangerous, the photographer insisted that the couple take his, but they refused. Other people who encountered the couple along their journey said that Bessie seemed extremely against this trip and like she had just had enough and she was really regretting going on it, and that she constantly said how she just wanted to head back. After the couple was noticed to be missing, a search was conducted by men that were actually hired by Glen's father, and they had also had a small plane out looking for the couple. This plane had actually located Glen and Bessie's boat, which was located about 3 weeks after the couple was last seen in early December. The boat was found floating around River Mile 237, and the boat was actually floating upright, and it had all of the couple's supplies inside of it, and they were all still intact. Amongst their supplies included their camera, which had photos of the couple on it, as well as Bessie's journal. The last journal entry was on November 30th, and it stated that the couple had been at Diamond Creek. Evidence suggested that the couple had made it to River Mile 225 and that they had set up and actually camped there before vanishing. After finding the Hyde's boat upright with all of their supplies inside of it, they assumed that Glen and Bessie were actually out somewhere in the woods waiting to be rescued, so they continued the search for them for quite a while, but no sign of the couple was ever found besides their boat. Now, although nobody has any idea for sure what happened to Glen and Bessie Hyde, there are definitely a lot of theories in this case. And this is actually going to be one of the missing 411 cases that I actually am going to dive into some of the theories just a little bit, because I think personally that they are very interesting, and I think that you guys might find them quite interesting as well. Now, as this is a missing 411 case, there definitely is some more kind of paranormal, extraterrestrial theories to this case. Some people think that the couple could have been abducted by Bigfoot, and others believe that there could have been alien involvement. Now, I personally am very open to these kinds of theories, that there was maybe some sort of extraterrestrial or paranormal involvement, although I know a lot of people are not into those kinds of things and don't believe them at all, but I personally am open to that kind of theory. And because I wanted to give you guys every single kind of angle in this case, I did try to look up why people think that that happened. I mean, it is very seemingly for the fact that the couple did just vanish off the face of the earth, which in some cases does suggest, some kind of paranormal or extraterrestrial involvement. But in this case particular, there just isn't too much backup evidence to suggest that either of those are what happened. But I do personally think that there could be some kind of back to this, and that could still be a possibility. Another theory that you would assume people to jump to right off the bat in this case is that the couple somehow fell out of their boat and drowned in the rapids. But the thing about this that doesn't make sense is that their boat was found floating upright with all of their other belongings still inside of it, suggesting that the boat never tipped over. And you would think that if the couple had drowned in the rapids, that their remains would have turned up by now. The photographer who had last seen the couple was actually suspected of murdering Glen Hyde when a skull was found on his property in 1976. But these remains were actually identified later to belong to a 22-year-old male who couldn't have died any earlier than 1972. Now, I couldn't find anywhere if this photographer was actually responsible for the death of the male that was found on his property, but I definitely think that it is possible if he murdered one person, then he could be responsible for the disappearance of Glen and Bessie Hyde, because he again was the last person to see them alive. In 1971, on a commercial boat ride, an elderly woman actually stood up and announced to everybody on the ship that she was Bessie Hyde. Someone on this boat who was familiar with this case actually asked the woman what had happened to Glen, to which this woman responded that she killed him. She said that while on their little trip that the couple had gotten into a fight, and she had stabbed Glen and then hiked out to Peach Springs, Arizona, and got onto the first bus that she had seen and started a new life. After making these drastic claims, this woman was investigated, and this is absolutely crazy, but after she was investigated, it was found that her name is actually Liz Cutler, and she was a psychology professor at Ohio State, and she got pleasure out of playing mind games with people. So that whole story that she had made up about the couple getting into a fight and Bessie murdering Glen was just completely fabricated from her own mind. Now, this next theory is one that is very strange, but to me it seems like one that is most promising. And that is that a woman by the name of George White, who also goes by the name of George Clark, is actually Bessie Hyde. George White was actually famous for being the first woman to run the rapids on the Grand Canyon, which is what I believe Bessie Hyde would have been famous for had she have made it. After George's death in 1992, her friends kind of began to talk while packing up her stuff and getting ready to, get rid of her things. And that is when they found out that nobody was very close to this woman, and even the people who considered themselves to be quite close to George were not invited into her home or ever invited to come over and visit. While cleaning out her house, these same friends actually found a birth certificate that stated that George White as well as George Clark were not this woman's name, and that her birth name was actually Bessie D. Ross. Another strange thing is that this woman actually had the marriage certificate for Glen and Bessie Hyde inside of her home. She also slept with a pistol inside of her underwear drawer, although I'm not sure how strange that is. But the fact that her name was Bessie and she had Glen and Bessie Hyde's birth certificate, as well as she was the first woman to run the rapids, seems quite strange to me. But somebody who actually really studied this case came forward and said that he doesn't believe that there is any resemblance between the two women at all, and he thinks that it is impossible that George Clark is Bessie Hyde. The most widely speculated theories in this case is that the couple had passed away possibly by some fluke accident, or that Glen possibly murdered Bessie by pushing her too hard and then disposed of his body or killed himself. And another theory is that Bessie was just done. She was so fed up and she ended up murdering Glen and ran away to start her own life. Like always, I would love to hear your guys' theories on what could have possibly happened to these people in the comment box down below, so don't forget to leave me a comment on what you think about these cases. My heart goes out to Glen and Bessie Hyde's loved ones and anybody who was affected by their case. These cases are absolutely the saddest. When people just vanish or go missing and you are left with absolutely no answers, they are just so heartbreaking. But I hope that with new technology, maybe something will come forward that will lead us to be able to close these cases. But guys, that brings us to the end of this video. If you like this video, please give it a big thumbs up and don't forget to comment down below what you'd like to see in my future videos. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on that notification bell so that you don't miss any of my future videos. Thank you so much for watching and I'll see you in the next one. Bye guys!